Hello, this is Joe from Students in Aviation. And this session, we're going to be discussing a little bit about the controls, the yoke control, the rudder pedals, and then your throttle over here, and your mixture, and then also the trim control. And we're also going to talk about how those controls affect the flying surfaces, the control surfaces on the aircraft. So the first thing I'm going to do in this lesson, we're actually going to launch our default situation. And to make it a little bit easier for us, instead of putting the aircraft in the air, we're actually going to start it on the ground, start from on the ground here. All right, so I'll wait for that to load. It'll take a second here. And wait for that. It takes about a minute here. There we go. All right. So this is on approach. This is our default situation. We actually want to go to the Reedsburg Airport and on the runway there. So I'm going to hold down my Alt key here and tap the 2 key. And you'll see what happens here is it actually places it on the runway. Right. Before we take off, obviously we're going to make sure our controls are free and correct, which is what we do in the real world. We'll pull back on the control yoke, push it forward here, and we'll do the same with our rudder pedals. We'll push them all the way forward and all the way left and right, it is, and then we'll do the same thing with the throttle. Move that in. We can see we've got power there. Our mixture is set full, and then our trim, we'll set that in a second. So let's talk about how these controls affect the aircraft on the ground and in the air. So we've got our control yoke. This is called the yoke. And this controls the aircraft bank left and right. So if I bank the aircraft or turn the yoke this way, the aircraft is going to bank in that direction. If I turn it to the left, it's going to bank to the left. All right. If I pull back on the control yoke like this, it's going to cause the aircraft to climb. If we push in on it, it causes the aircraft to descend. So let's look at from the outside of the aircraft to see what control surfaces are affected by these controls in the aircraft. All right, so I'm going to switch to the outside view here by pushing that little hat switch, hat 2, to the left. And now we're outside. I'm just going to change our view a little bit so you can see this a little bit better. Okay, so you'll notice here as I turn the control yoke to the left like this, the ailerons on the aircraft, these are called ailerons. There's one on this side, the right aileron, and then the left aileron. And you'll notice how they change there. So this is a left turn right here. You can see my yoke is, I've got it banked all the way to the left here, and it's causing this aileron to go up. That pushes this wing down, and then this one, the opposite aileron, the right aileron, is deflecting air down, and it's causing the aircraft or the wing to rise on this side. So they work just opposite each other. So I'm going to do a right bank. Watch the ailerons now on this side and this side here. So this is a right bank. Again, this is deflecting the air up, and which actually, we know from Newton's laws there, that's going to push this wing, this side of the wing down. And on this aileron, it's deflecting the air down, which again, according to Newton's laws here, it's going to cause this aileron or this wing to rise. So that's what that's called roll in an aircraft. So if I want to roll to the left, I'm going to go ahead and turn my yoke to the left, and it causes those ailerons to move up and down correspondingly if I want to do a left or right turn there. So the other part of the yoke is to climb and descend, or to change the pitch of the aircraft. And that right there, the yoke control also controls not just the ailerons, but also controls the elevator, which is back here behind the what we call the empennage, or the tail of the aircraft itself here. So there's the elevator. Now watch what happens to the elevator when I pull up on the control yoke. So here's the control yoke there. I'm going to pull back on it and see how the aileron goes up. That's deflecting the nose down, which causes the aircraft to want to point up like that. So it goes into a climb. If I want the aircraft to descend, I go ahead and push the yoke forward. So we'll see, watch us push forward right here, and you'll see that the elevator, when I push it forward, I'm just gonna hold it there. You can see how the elevator there now is pointing down, which causes the tail to wanna pitch up and cause the aircraft, the nose of the aircraft, to pitch down. So that's how we control the aircraft in flight. Now, obviously, there's a very important control surface on the aircraft, and that's called the rudder. And it works much like a rudder on a boat or a ship. Those are controlled by our rudder pedals. So here's our rudder pedals here. Rudder pedals, if I push to the left, it causes our rudder. Let's actually change your view here a little bit. So watch that rudder here. We're looking for the back of the aircraft here. So I'm going to push on the left rudder pedal. So you can see here I'm pushing that down. I don't know if you can see that very well. But watch the rudder pedal there. That's a left turn. And it also, if I push it to the right, it does the other side. So again, just like a boat, it's going to cause the aircraft to yaw. That's what we call yaw here. So we talked about roll, the aircraft rolling like this back and forth. And again, that's when we use our control yoke. It's going to cause the aircraft to roll to the left or to the right. We've got pitch, which causes the aircraft to pitch up or down. So if I pull back on the control yoke here, the aircraft pitches up. And if I push on the yoke, it causes the aircraft to pitch down. And the rudder pedals cause the aircraft to yaw left and right. So like this, they cause the aircraft to yaw left. If I push on the left rudder pedal, it's causing the aircraft to yaw to the left. If I push on the right rudder pedal, it causes it to yaw to the right. There's a much more detailed explanation of that we'll get into later on. There's a lot of issues with the aircraft when it comes to single engine aircraft. They typically have a tendency to turn to the left when they are at a high angle of attack. And again, that's something we can get into later on. All right, so the other part I'm going to point out is the rudder pedals also have another function, and that is brakes. We can actually apply, in most general aviation aircraft, we can apply differential braking to the main wheels on the aircraft. So if I push on the toe portion of my right rudder pedal, let's say for instance, that's applying a brake to the right main wheel. Okay, and that's going to cause the aircraft to turn real sharply to the right, and I'll show you how to do that in a second. If I push on the left rudder pedal, the toe on that, again, you can see how I'm pushing on that. I'm not pushing it forward like this. I'm actually just applying pressure to the toe there. That applies brakes on the left main wheel. Okay. Another thing I'm going to point out here too is that the rudder pedals are actually tied to the nose gear on most general aviation, single engine general aviation aircraft. So if I push on the right rudder pedal, here I'm going to push that down, watch how the nose wheel swings over to the right. So it causes the aircraft on the ground anyway to turn to the right. And I can do the same thing with the left rudder pedal. If I push on the left rudder pedal like that, it's going to cause the aircraft to turn left. So let's actually try that out. So the first thing we want to do here is we want to disengage our parking brake. So I'm going to tap parking brake right here, and that'll disable that. Let's jump back into the pilot seat here. Click on that. All right, and then I'm just going to go down and make sure that let's get rid of that. Okay, so our parking brake is off right now. So if I apply power right now, I don't want to actually take off. I just want to taxi around the aircraft. Now watch what happens here. So when I apply a little bit of power, if I want to give it power, I want to push in the throttle here. We don't want to give it too much. We just want to be moving at basically kind of a fast walk here on the runway here. And if I want to turn to the left, I don't use my control yoke. See, I'm turning my yoke and nothing's happening there. And that's because this is not tied to that nose gear. The rudder pedals are. So if I want to turn to the left, I'm going to apply left rudder pedal. So watch what happens here. See how I'm just applying a little bit. I'm not applying a lot of rudder. They're just a little bit. So again, left, or this is right rudder, and it steers to the right. Now let's try doing differential braking now. So let's say I want to do a real sharp turn here. So I'm going to apply full the toe brakes here. So let's just pause it right here. So that was to turn in that direction I wanted. I just pressed on the toe brake there and it did a real sharp turn. And generally speaking, you're not going to use that a lot in real life unless you have castering, nose or tail wheel on the aircraft, they typically, most aircraft, we're just going to be able to steer with the rudder pedals if they're linked to the nose gear. So, but again, if I want to steer the aircraft, I'm just going to use those rudder pedals and just move them back and forth. If I want to do a real sharp turn, I'm going to also add in a little bit of toe brake there. Normally, and particularly in this 172, we'll just apply the rudder pedal or the brakes to both wheels when we come to a stop on landing. So on landing, we're actually going to press both of those, rotate those rudder pedals forward, as opposed to trying to move them back and forth like that. We could actually apply both brakes there like that. Okay, so those are the main controls. Let's actually practice a little bit here. Now, one thing you can do if you're a teacher, you can have your students put their hands on their lap like this and tell them not to touch the rudder or not to touch the yoke, that is, with their hands, and just use their feet to control the direction of the aircraft as they taxi it on the ground. So here I'm just going to taxi. I'm going to try to stay right on the center line. When we taxi, we always want to taxi with the nose gear right on the center line there. So we've got that. And I'll give it a little bit more power so we can get down there. And if we want to come to a stop, we're going to rotate both rudder pedals forward like that. There we go. So we can see that they're stopped. You can see I've got my feet on there. Of course, I want to just enable the parking brake. I would just tap that, and it's going to enable the parking brake. If I look down here, we'll see here the parking brake is right there. You can see how that's on. If I tap that parking brake again, it disables it, and you can see we're moving there. So I'm just going to turn it back on. There we go. We got the parking brake on there. All right. So I want to get back into my pilot seat. So I'm going to tap the white button right here. That puts us back in the seat. We're ready to actually start taxiing again. So I'm going to tap my parking brake to disable it. And now we can see that we're moving again. And what I'm going to do a sharp turn. We're going to go back onto the runway and do a takeoff here. And then we're going to show some of these control surfaces in flight. So we'll do a sharp turn. And notice now I'm applying right brake there. You see how fast we turn there? You can see here, I don't know if you can see my rudder pedals there. So I just want to get that lined up there. Normally at this point, we'd actually make a call. We'd say something like Reedsburg traffic, Cessna, 1234 is departing runway 36 Reedsburg. So I'm going to roll onto the runway here. And normally we'd want to look to the left or right, make sure there's no traffic coming from over there. And we look to the left here, make sure there's no traffic over there. And if we're good there, we can just go ahead and taxi onto the runway. Line up with the center line here. Okay, and I'm just going to stop here for a second. So one of the things that I like to do in the real world is always run up the engine just before you take off. So I'm at a stop here. I've got both my brakes on. Notice that my toes are pushing the the rudder pedals full forward there. So that's the parking, or that's causing the aircraft to stay put there. And I can apply full power and it's not going to move there. But what I'm going to do here is I'm going to apply throttle here. I'm just going to push the throttle in a little bit. That gives us a little more power. What I'm looking at right here is this RPM gauge right here. And you can see I'm pushing in the throttle a little bit more. I'm going to reduce it. So I'm pulling it back there. That reduces the power. If I want to add power, I just keep pushing that throttle forward until we get up to about 1500 RPM. And then I'm just going to go over to my gauges here and make sure everything looks good. We've got good temperature and pressure looks good on there. We've got good vacuum, and we've got plenty of fuel, so we're ready for this flight. All right, so here we go. I'm going to go ahead and let go of the the brakes, toe brakes there, and apply full power. There, that's full power right there. All right, and we want to basically try to stay on that center line if we can. So we're going to use our rudder pedals initially as we roll down the runway because the rudder doesn't have any effectiveness. All right, we've reached our rotation speed, so I'm going to pull back very gently. Doesn't take much. You can see I'm just pulling very lightly on the control yoke there. Again, if you're a teacher, stress to your students that they do not have to have both their hands on the yoke, or they don't have to have a death grip on the control yoke there. We want to make sure that they use a light touch. The best pilots always have a light touch on the controls. It allows them to hear what the aircraft is saying to them. And aircraft do actually talk to you. You have to be able to listen to them, and you can't listen when you've got a death grip on your rudder or your yoke itself there. All right, so the other thing I'm going to do here is I'm just going to use my trim control here so that I don't have to hold on to my yoke. You can see here I've trimmed the aircraft out so that I don't have to touch the yoke at all. I could actually do an entire flight like this minus the takeoff and landing with just my rudder pedals and my trim itself. So if I want to trim the aircraft up, I'm going to rotate this wheel down. That causes the nose to rise. It doesn't take much there. And if I want to pitch the nose of the aircraft down, I'm going to rotate it forward like this. That's the trim there. And what that does is it takes off, it removes the control pressures on the yoke itself, so we don't constantly have to hold it. Say we had to climb to 10,000 feet. The last thing we want to do is have to hold on to this while we're maybe checking other things or adjusting our radio frequencies or something like that. So we use the trim a lot in aviation, and you have to get very comfortable with using that. You should be able to do an entire flight with nothing more than rudders and a trim control, unless you've got a lot of turns and stuff like that. So that's the purpose of the trim there, and actually that's another minor control, but it is very important in controlling the aircraft. So the three things that we talked about here today, so we talked about roll, pitch, and yaw. So roll, again, is controlled by using the control yoke, turning it left. Right there, you can see how I turned it to the left there. Actually, let's turn our yoke on. The virtual yoke will turn back on there, so you can actually see what I'm doing here. You can see that it mimics whatever I do here physically on the physical yoke. It does the same thing on the virtual yoke there. So again, if I want to turn to the left here, let's actually bring our power back a little bit. We don't need to climb out too fast here. So I'm just bringing that throttle back there. That's full power, and I'm just going to bring it back a little bit. I'm looking at my RPM there. I see that it's at 2,500, that RPM. That should be fine. Again, we don't need to blaze through the skies here. All right, so if I want to turn to the left again, I'm just going to go ahead and turn the control yoke. Again, a light touch on the control yoke. You don't need a lot of power there to get it to turn. And then we're just going to go ahead and do a nice gentle turn. And notice that I don't constantly hold the control yoke over there to start. All I use the yoke for is just to get the turn started. Once it's started and we're in the turn itself, then we just basically let it go back to center there. And then we might have to tweak a little bit, especially if we're doing steep turns or something like that. Right, so let's demonstrate a turn to the right, okay? So I'm just gonna go ahead and rotate my yoke to the right a little bit. When I get to the proper angle here, I'm just going to hold off on it. I'm just going to keep my yoke the same. I might want to pull back on the yoke a little bit to push us through the turn. And then when we get, let's see, let's roll out on heading of north here. There we go. All right. And now we're flying north. So we'll trim that up a little bit there. All right, so that's the control yoke. If I want to climb, so let's say we want to go into a climb, what I'm going to do, I'm going to look at my altimeter right there. That's saying that we're at about 3,200 feet. And that's our vertical speed indicator. That tells us how fast we're climbing in hundreds of feet per minute right there. So right now we're in about a 400 foot per minute climb. It's dropping down to about 300. Let's go into a higher pitch climb. So let's say we want to climb at 1,000 feet per minute. So I'm going to pull back on my control yoke right here, pull back on it. You can see it's very gentle. It's not aggressive there. Ooh, I blew right past that 1,000 feet per minute. So here, I want to get it right around there. And now this is when we can actually use the trim to make it life a little bit easier for us, so we don't have to constantly pull back on the control yoke. So I'm just going to use my trim here to trim the nose up. We have to do it a couple times until the aircraft stabilizes. There you can see 1,000. I may have to add a little bit of power, so I'm going to push power in here a little bit. So we'll trim that up a little bit more. Now we're at about 1,000 foot per minute climb. Let's change it a little bit there. We can always adjust the pitch a little bit. Notice it's really sensitive. For those of you that are gamers out there, you won't like this because it is they are very light controls. They're not something that you can just throw around. You always want to use a light touch there. So all right, so and again, notice I'm just using a couple fingers. Even when I fly larger multi-engine aircraft, I just use 3 fingers. In real life, it just doesn't take much pressure there. Okay. All right, so if I want to go into a descent, I would just go ahead and I can go ahead and first off push my nose down. Let's say we want to climb or descend at about 500 feet per minute right there. And I could go ahead and hold the yoke in that position to keep it at 500 feet per minute descent. But I really want to just use my Let's bring our throttle back a little bit so we're in a descent. I just first establish our descent with the yoke itself, and then we want to trim out the forces there. So let's see, let's get the attitude right there. It's a little bit too much there. There we go. Yeah, and you can practice this anytime. See if you can do a constant rate descent. It might take a little while. The key to remember there is to use your yoke first to establish the pitch that you want to fly at, and then once you're at the correct pitch, then go ahead and use the trim to maintain that whatever that 500 feet per minute or 1,000 feet per minute descent or climb in there. So okay, all right. So let's take a look at what the rudder does to the aircraft. Again, remember, rudder causes the aircraft to yaw left and right. So I'm going to apply full right rudder. So I'm just going to apply this. Watch what happens to the nose when I do that. Here's full right rudder. See how the nose kind of yaws to the right there? On the outside, we're actually flying at an angle. So if I switch to the outside view, you can see the aircraft is kind of slipping or sliding through the air there, or skidding through the air. If I do the same thing with left rudder now, I'm just going to go ahead and apply full left rudder, and we can see the aircraft is actually skidding like this. It's actually skidding through the air like that. In the air, we use the rudder to coordinate our turns. And that's getting into a little more advanced area. I won't go into great detail with it, but basically when we do a turn, there's this thing called adverse yaw. So if I actually go into a turn, the aircraft wants to turn in the opposite direction because of this adverse yaw effect. We're going to apply a little bit of rudder, not a lot, when we go into a turn. So I'm going to show you a steep turn here. Let's zoom out a little bit here. Okay, so watch what happens here when I do a left turn. I'm going to apply just a little bit of rudder. Well, actually, I'm not going to use the rudder at all. So watch what happens here as I do a steep turn. It's hard to see, but the aircraft actually yaws a little bit this way when we go into our turn. Once we get in the turn, it's not a problem. We let go of the rudder there. But to go into the turn and not have that adverse yaw, we want to apply just a little bit of rudder there in the direction of the turn. And again, that's just initially in the turn. Once you're in the turn, the rudder should be neutral there, just like it is right now. So let's take a look again. This is going to be a right turn. So we do a steep turn here. I'm going to go ahead and hold it. See what I'm doing there with my control yoke. It's basically the yoke is straight. I keep that turn going in there. And notice in relation to the horizon, the aircraft is not moving a lot. That's because I'm pulling back a little bit on the control yoke there. I want to maintain that. That's how we maintain the distance between the horizon and the top of the aircraft. That means that we're hopefully not gaining altitude or losing altitude there. All right, there we go. Let's jump back into the pilot seat. Okay, there we are. All right, so again, rudder and trim, and then obviously the ailerons control the roll, and the elevator controls the pitch there. If I want to pull back, the aircraft is going to pitch up. If I push the nose down, it's going to descend. Notice it doesn't take much to get it to climb or descend. They're just very small movements. A little bit of push down, and we're pointing at the ground, and pull back up and we're pointing at the sky. So it doesn't take much. And if you want to keep your passengers happy, again, you can use really light controls on there. Okay, well, I hope that training video has been helpful for you at giving you a description of those different primary flight controls there on the aircraft, the surfaces that are used to fly the airplane. We'll get into a little bit more into flaps and some other items on the aircraft when it comes to landing. All right, thank you very much for watching. Take care.